Okay, so I'm going to do this video that talks about the four S's, the four cities that start with an S that leads the nation in terms of apartment and house price. Now, the biggest are always in California, the most expensive, I should say. The most expensive cities that start with an S, and all of them start with an S. That is San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose, and now Seattle. All four are on the West Coast, and all four are the most expensive cities in the United States to purchase a home or even to even rent, right? They're all battling about the same. Now, the order I gave is not the correct order. San Francisco leads the pack, and sometimes that bounces to San Jose. San Jose is very expensive as well. They're right there in the same area, roughly. And then there's San Diego, which is down south. Now, Seattle has passed New York a long time ago. You used to think of expensive cities, and you would think of New York City being one of them, Boston, all of those places. But last year, Seattle passed Boston and left it back in the dust. And now it is number four. Now, it could easily move forward and no longer be number four. In some aspects, it's number three when you look at the fact that, and it replaces San Jose, or I'm sorry, San Diego. San Diego is actually number three, and so, but it's barely right there at number three versus Seattle. And so, what does all this mean? Well, we already know that California is expensive, and all the cities in California is expensive, including Los Angeles. But what does it mean for people who want to live here? Because we have a lot of people leaving the Bay Area in Southern California for Portland and for Seattle specifically, right? What it means is that we're now facing a massive housing crunch. One of the things that Noel and I talk about is, man, Tacoma's really changing. Like, it's really, really changing. I'll get back on track here to Seattle in just a second, but Tacoma's really changing the way, just culturally, right? And what I mean by culturally is the things that we normally used to know Tacoma as is starting to just kind of fade away. Now there are cities that you can go to and that never changes. Like if you look at an example, Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Indianapolis, they may grow and be a little bit more, urbanized and more population, but culturally they stay pretty much kind of the same. In Tacoma, the culture is starting to change quite a bit. A city that didn't really care much about art is now pumping a lot of money into art, for example. A city that had a lot of parks that were just random parks everywhere, some of them just were open spaces, are now investing huge sums of money into masterpiece type parks. Things like that. So culturally, things here are starting to shift and change. And you're starting to see that in many different aspects when I talk about culture, not only in terms of the different types of eateries that are here, to the different style of homes that are starting to be developed. Everything here is culturally starting to shift and look very similar to that in Seattle, right? Seattle, getting back on track now, after I did that little segue, is for the last 9-10 months, basically prices there for homes just bottomed out, right? People thought maybe there was a housing bubble, and they thought that, this would all come crashing down. And rents actually kind of hovered, and then they went down. I mean, Seattle has more construction of new buildings than any other city in the country. The entire country doesn't compare to what Seattle has when it comes to housing stock being developed, the number of cranes that are in the sky. No other city tops that. In fact, there are some states that don't have nearly as many total sky cranes as what the city of Seattle has in its sky right now. That's kind of crazy. Tacoma's not too far behind. I mean, for example, to give you an idea, the state of New Mexico, and you look at Tacoma, Tacoma has more sky cranes right now than the entire state of New Mexico. right? But you're looking at a state that doesn't have a massive population. The state of New Mexico has less than 1 million people. The area that we're talking about here of Tacoma, South Sound, has about 1 million people. So you're really you're comparing a city to, or I guess the South Sound region to an entire state, but we still have more development here in Tacoma. Imagine something like Seattle, which has more cranes in the sky than some of your bigger states out there. And so what it's doing is, for a while, all of that was creating this kind of, I call it the Seattle effect in a different way. A lot of people were looking at this saying, okay, there's all this development going on, but the prices haven't changed. So a lot of people just stopped looking at Seattle and went to other places, focused their attentions up north, focused their attentions down here, focused their attention in every direction, radiating out from Seattle. So basically, the market just kind of did this. And you also have to keep in mind, too, that a lot of the housing that was being purchased here were from people, foreign nationals, people from China. So there were a lot of people that were buying, similar to what happened in Vancouver, Canada, where you had a lot of folks from overseas buying several different types of homes and condos and everything else, and they never lived in them. They bought them up so that they could basically sell them one day at a much higher price. And so you had all this bought up, whatever, all this property that was purchased at one point in time, and hardly anyone was living in it. So then it created this market that was a bubble, because developers just kept building, and they kept charging more and more and more, and then they realized most of the population just can't really afford it. So you had a big problem up there. Folks thought that was going to happen here in Seattle, but there's a lot of things that I said, wait until the summer. The summer is the best time to gauge, I think, a market, because you have more activity. The kids are out of school, so you're able to bring the kids and the whole family to look at a house or look at an apartment. You also, with kids out of school, if you need to change school districts, you can do that. So a lot of folks move around this time. So I told folks, wait until the summer to see if this is some sort of a bubble or a correction, because I kept saying, I think it's a correction. And that is exactly what's happening. Now, I did a video not long ago that was talking about the Tacoma's the hottest market. And it still is, right? It still is. But it's also the most affordable in the Puget Sound region, right? It has a long way to catch up. Seattle, on the other hand, has been pretty steady in terms of housing prices in the last few months, after it had been tanking for quite a bit. And now those prices are starting to ease back up again. And the same thing for apartments. They're starting to ease back up again. Why? Well, because people are saying, well, maybe we should give it a shot, right? If developers are lowering the price and rents are starting to lower a little bit, let's take advantage of that. So a lot of people, the price point was right where it needed to be, and they flooded right in to take up the spaces that were available in Seattle, and there's still tons of spaces. So what does that do? The price of everything's going to go up. Motorcycle. So the price of everything's going to go up. So now rents are starting to rise again, and home prices are starting to rise again as well. The entire region is starting to move upward again. People have said, should I hold off on buying a home? Because if I hold off maybe a year or two, then the prices will go down. And I told them I don't see that happening. Not for a long period. It may happen for a period of several months. But as you can see, less than 10 months later, from all the decline that Seattle had in terms of prices, and they weren't massive. I mean, in some areas it was massive, in some areas not so much, but it was noticeable. Now that's starting to catch back up again. It's starting to go up because of the simple fact that Seattle is just a hot housing market. When you look at places like Bellevue, and the fact that Amazon, for all of its negatives, it creates a lot of synergy. No one can really deny that. I mean, the whole Nashville yards, Nashville is close to my hometown. And the Nashville yards that they're talking about, and Amazon released a video, and they're talking about what that does to Nashville. Nashville, Tennessee has drastically changed. I mean, the Nashville I remember back when I used to drive down there at the age of, I don't know, 20, 21, 22. It doesn't even look the same at all. I mean, there's a section of downtown that looks the same, but then the rest, it was so foreign. And when you look at Bellevue, people can say the same thing. Look back 15 years ago, and Bellevue looked like a tiny little one-horse town. Now it looks like a big, huge city, even though it isn't. All the glass towers everywhere. Amazon's building a 44-story or 43-story building there. So they're adding thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs in Bellevue, as well as still growing in Seattle. Not as much. So there's still that. Not to mention that Apple has, put in a whole lot of effort here as well. Facebook has done even more so. Google, all of the big tech companies have focused their energies on Seattle. So there is still a massive demand for tech talent. And so, of course, you're going to have a lot of people that flood in. Now, I do think there will come a point, and people say, is there a tipping point? I think it starts to tip when you look at prices like in San Francisco. When it gets that bad, I think that's when people are just going to break. Because even in San Francisco, they're noticing a decline because people just can't afford it. The average person just cannot afford, even tech folks can't afford it. It's just so expensive. And we're starting to see Seattle go that same direction. That's going to take a little bit, but it's starting to become too unattainable for a lot of people. So I think you're still going to see a lot more people move down this way and actually start to invest their energy down here. Your money's going to go farther. I've said that before. Now, would I buy today? If you can afford a home in Seattle, I would say buy now. If you can afford it, buy it within the next little bit of time. And I stress that because right now there is still quite a bit of availability. Seattle has quite a bit because the prices were tanking. A lot of people had houses on the market. Some of them took them off the market. Now that the prices are starting to tick back up again, people are putting them back on the market, so there's more availability. So I would say if you can afford it, then I would say jump on it. But most people can't afford the average price of $700,000 or so in Seattle, right? That means that half the prices are less than that and half are more than that. So you're going to have a lot of different issues when it comes to getting approved and all of that. When it comes to other parts, other regions, Bellevue, if you can't afford Seattle, I've said it before, Bellevue, Mercer Island, all of that, don't even waste your time. Because if you can't live in Seattle and you can't afford that, you're definitely not going to be able to afford Bellevue or any of those other places. So when you look at anything east, the prices start to go up. When you look at places like Issaquah and things like that, not as bad, obviously, as Bellevue, but still going to be up there. The cheapest place is still Tacoma, but not by much. Even Bellevue or even Everett is pretty pricey as well for some people. They just can't afford it. Down here, we're still around the 370 mark, 380 mark. I would say probably next year we'll be over the 400 in terms of average price. So if you're looking to buy a home and you can afford 350 on up to, let's say, 400, I would say Tacoma is going to be your best bet. I would also say if that doesn't work, probably if you don't like that area, I would say Gig Harbor, I would say Bremerton, I would say those places, Kitsap County. You're going to be able to find something in that range, so you don't necessarily have to live in a big city. You can live up in places like Bremerton or anywhere in Kitsap County, Port Orchard, and you're able to find a pretty decent home. The good thing about Kitsap County and down here in Pierce County, you're going to have Snohomish County, you're going to have a lot more yard typically. So most homes, unlike Seattle, you're going to have a lot more yards. That's changing down here. I don't know about the other places, but it's changing down here. For example, our home is not on a massive lot. There are some lots that are huge down here. It's not a big lot. It's not a small lot. It's just okay. But I have seen recently where someone knocked down a house, similar to this one and put 2 homes in that same footprint. So you're starting to see very tiny front yards, very tiny backyards. So imagine one home typically would have an okay yard. Now they're basically cutting that in half. You're starting to see more and more of that down here because people know that they can sell, instead of getting $380,000 for a home, why not push that up to $700 and something thousand for the both? So they're doing that. You're starting to see more and more of that. But I would say if you really and truly want to get in, I wouldn't wait if you could. Some people just can't afford it, and that's understandable. When it comes to rents, I don't see it improving anywhere, to be honest with you. And I say anywhere, I'm talking from Marysville, which is at the very far part of the region, close to Canada, all the way down to Spanaway, and any of that to the east and west. I don't see rent prices lowering at any point in time. You may find certain areas, you may go into certain communities and find it, and I would probably steer clear of some of those. But in your normal, typical areas that most people choose, you're not going to find rent prices going down anytime soon, even here. I mean, I did a video with brewery blocks, or I walked through and did a tour. That development by itself is pretty pricey. Everything here is starting to go up, to the point of where Noel and I notice things are starting to go up quite a bit. I talked to a neighbor the other day, and she was saying they didn't even have any intention on buying a home. Their spouse and her didn't have any intention on buying a home. When they had moved away, went to Portland, stayed there for about 10 years, came back because of a job, and were really and truly wanting to rent. But because they got a deal on a home, which was still pricey, they decided to just buy it because they knew that if they waited too much longer, they couldn't afford it. We're now approaching that point where we can't afford it. If we were today go and try to buy a house here in Tacoma, we probably couldn't afford it. It's getting to that point. There's still a good crop, but it's starting to get to that point where you just cannot really purchase it if you're looking for a home that's under 300 something thousand. Now you can find things under that. You can find some homes under that. But today, Noel showed me a home for $160,000 in Tacoma. And they raised the price on it. Okay? When you look at the pictures of the home, it was gutted. I mean, all you saw was studs. So like this wall back here didn't have any drywall, nothing. It was just studs. Now, this is what happened in Seattle. I remember seeing homes that were $300,000, $400,000, and it was a disgusting house. The bathroom of that home that she showed me, the cabinets were all busted out. There were holes all in the wall, and they actually raised the price. I don't know how much they raised it to, but the home was basically at $160,000 here in Tacoma. So that can give you an idea. I think it was a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, I believe, or it could be 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I can't remember, but it was only 700 and something square feet. So I think it was 2-bedroom, 2 baths, or 1 bath. It was only 700 and something square feet. Not very big. If you remember the apartment back in Seattle, about that size or so. I think that was even bigger than that. But that small space, again, it just reiterates kind of what you saw up in Seattle. Small, tiny, boxy little houses that are less than 1,000 square feet selling for big amounts of money. This is a house that needs a tremendous amount of work. I always tell people get fixer-uppers, but this is not a fixer-upper. This is where you need to have a crew come in and actually bring it up to code and everything. Like, it's beyond just what you can do on your own. I mean, the average person. So that's going for $160,000. So anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Any questions you have, put them down in the comment section below. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.